Welcome to the Happy Rebel podcast, where we explore the sacred in between, the liminal spaces where healing, growth, and transformation take root. I'm your host, Kelly Street, therapist, coach, and the heart behind Happy Rebel, where we blend self-development practices with the tools to support your journey. It's my mission to help others embrace both the light and the dark within us. Here, we dive deep into living authentically, navigating transitions, and finding meaning in the shadows. You'll hear soulful conversations and practical wisdom shared by guests, along with my own teachings and reflections. So whether you're seeking guidance through a tough transition, looking to ignite your creativity, or craving a deeper connection with yourself, you're in the right place. This is the Happy Rebel podcast. I'm so glad you're here. Welcome back to the Happy Rebel podcast. Today, I'm talking about power. So it would be silly in our Power Word series not to include the word power. But in power, I'm not talking about the kind of power that dominates, manipulates, or performs, but the kind of power that lives deep in your bones, the kind of power that's been exiled or taken away from many of us, especially in the tangled webs of relationships that feel like love, but often aren't. So today, we're going to explore what happens when power gets distorted, when one person inflates and the other disappears, when we fall in love with a reflection, or when we trade our voice for approval. This, on one hand, this is an episode about narcissistic dynamics, about people-pleasing, or what I prefer to call self-abandonment, and a myth that holds it all, Narcissus and echo. Let's begin with a breath. Inhale through the nose and exhale slowly through the mouth. Let your shoulders drop, let your jaw loosen. And now, gently turn inward and ask yourself, where does my power live? Is it in the belly? Is it in the spine? Is it hidden, held, trembling, fierce? Notice, is there a place in your body that contracts when you think about taking up space, speaking your truth, saying no? And if so, can you offer that place just a little more breath, a little more warmth? You don't need to change anything. Just witness. This is the beginning of reclaiming power, not as a force, but as presence, wholeness, truth. With another breath in and out, come back to this moment and prepare to learn about power. So the reason why I wanted to talk about power is that power gets a bad rap, especially for those of us who are raised to be nice or agreeable or good. But power in its true form is sacred. Power is the ability to stand rooted in yourself, to say yes when you mean yes and no when you mean no. In distorted relationships, especially ones where there are narcissistic dynamics, power gets hijacked. One person uses it to control. The other gives away power to stay safe. And the more that plays out, the more painful, confusing, and shameful it becomes. I wanted to talk about power today because I think in media, in the news, on social media, there is becoming such a fight about what it means to be in power or to have power. And really, a lot of people I've seen are pushing down people who want power. And then I'm also seeing power getting misused and abused. And part of the reason that I want to talk about power from the framework of narcissism or the myth of Narcissus and echo is because I think using that myth and the origin story of where narcissism comes from can really reframe what that is for people. You know, narcissism is a really hot topic right now, and narcissism tied with power, like those two things are so intimately connected in our society. And I think it's often misunderstood. So I hope that you learn a lot today. I hope that you maybe come away with a new understanding of what power is, a new comfort with it, and also maybe a new understanding of the abuses or ways that power gets manipulated in this victim and villain paradigm that happens with narcissism and self-abandonment. So let's get into it. Over the last few years, I have had many clients come in who are in relationships with partners who display narcissistic traits. Super charming, polished, high functioning on the outside. But behind closed doors, they are dismissive, manipulative, never wrong, never truly available. And on the other side of that spectrum is the person who bends, who doubts themselves, who loses their center trying to avoid conflict. We often call that people pleasing, but honestly, that term feels way too sanitized, way too easy for me. What I see more deeply is that the people pleaser self-abandons. Deep disconnection from their voice, from their worth, from their boundaries. And so you've got the person who leans narcissistic, and you've got the person who self-abandons and relies completely on the other person for their identity and for their self-worth. Yuck. In talking about power and the narcissistic self-abandoner dynamic, I would be remiss without talking about my own experience with that a little bit. So I was married before my current happy, lovely marriage to my wonderful husband. And in that relationship, I was with someone who hadn't been diagnosed as with narcissistic personality disorder, but sure as hell could have. And he was that way. And I was a complete self-abandoner. I was looking to him constantly for assurance or guidance or reassurance on who I was and how I was to be in the world. So I think one example of this that fits into the myth of Narcissus and Echo that I'll get into in just a moment is he was very into fitness, owned gyms, personal training, and I was very into looking good. So, as was he, of course. Narcissists love to look good. But how this would play out for us is that over the course of our relationship, I would do what he told me to do, fitness or workout wise. He would tell me to lift weights, but then your body's getting too bulky. So I would stop lifting weights and I would do more cardio, or I would go to hot yoga every single day for a week or for weeks. And then I remember distinctly, I was feeling so good, so strong, so powerful in my body. And I was walking around his apartment, like getting ready in the morning. And I was just like, yeah, I feel strong. I feel beautiful. I feel great. And he goes, stop, wait. And he looks at me and he goes, you're getting too skinny. I'm not attracted to skinny girls. You need to start eating more. And my whole world crumbled because I felt that my view of myself was no longer valid. What I thought about myself, how good I felt, completely went out the window. And I instantly felt terrible and felt unwanted and rejected. And sure, we could villainize him, and we can, and maybe we should. That's gross. That's terrible behavior of a partner to do to someone else or to do to someone you love. And also, how sad that I was willing and able again and again to allow someone else to create my identity of myself. You know what I didn't do in that moment? I didn't go, excuse me, sir, I look amazing. I feel amazing. More importantly, shut up, back off. Or if you think I'm a little too skinny right now, like that's kind of your problem. And I know that I'm healthy. I know that I look good. But I didn't do that. I crumbled. I self-abandoned. I completely lost who I was in that moment for the sake of becoming who I hoped that he wanted me to be. But the thing was, is that it was never right. There was never a target to hit because the target kept moving. Okay, so with that story in mind, let me get into the myth of Narcissus and Echo, because I think this will be a helpful framing for how power is both taken and given away. So, the myth of Narcissus and Echo. The Greek myth gives us a potent mirror for power. Narcissus is cursed to fall in love with his own reflection, and Echo is cursed by Hera, and as a result, she can only repeat what others say. She cannot speak for herself. She's lost her voice. And Echo falls in love with Narcissus. She hides in the forest, whispering back whatever he says, hoping it will be enough to get him to notice her. But it never is. And eventually, Echo fades away until only her voice remains. It's a haunting myth, but also a perfect metaphor. Narcissus cannot relate to others. He's trapped in his own self-image. Echo cannot connect to herself. She is trapped in longing. And this is the dynamic so many people live inside. One person obsessed with control and perfection, the other obsessed with being enough to be finally seen and chosen and safe. But here's the thing. Echo isn't a helpless victim. She is a part of us all that gives away our voice to stay connected. She's the part that believes if I love them enough, maybe they'll love me back. But love doesn't work like that. Not real love, not soul love. So why does this happen? These patterns really, truly are not about weakness or malice. They're adaptations. They're rooted in trauma, in attachment wounds, and in unmet needs. Narcissistic traits often emerge from early emotional neglect, from performance-based love, or from hidden shame. Self-abandonment patterns often emerge from the need to be pleasing, to avoid rejection, and to earn approval by disappearing. Both patterns are survival strategies. Neither are rooted in true power. So, how do we begin to unravel this? How do you start to reclaim power if you're someone who manipulates it or if you're someone who's lost it? So, for those of you who have lost your voice, your work is to reclaim it, to say the thing, to feel the anger, to draw the line. Boundaries are not punishment. Boundaries are clarity. And sometimes they are the only thing that can break the spell. Real power is quiet, clear, and unshakable. And if you've been echo in your relationships, this is the moment to ask, where have I given up my voice? Where have I tried to earn love by being less than I am? And most importantly, am I ready to come back to myself? Here are a few, actually, you know what? So now that we're this far in, what is power? Usually I define the word a little bit earlier, but for some reason with this one, I wanted to kind of wait to come to the definition. So the definition of power is a couple of things. The ability to do something or act in a particular way, or the ability or capacity to direct or influence the behavior of others or the course of events. That's can be a solid definition of power. I think maybe there's another version of power that is something that I'm talking about. And I think how I would define it is soul power. Soul power is the kind of power that comes from being in right relationship with yourself. Soul power is the kind of power that says, know who I am. I trust my gut. I don't need to prove or please or perform. Soul power says, I can hold the discomfort of being misunderstood and still not betray myself. This is not the kind of power that we think of when we think of power, especially in political power or influence. Most of us weren't taught how to be powerful in this way, how to trust ourselves and hold discomfort. We were taught to obey. We were taught to accommodate. We were taught to hustle for love and to do anything for acceptance. And so power becomes something in those cases that you either fear or that you give away. But true power, this soul power, is your birthright. It lives in your body. It doesn't scream. It doesn't manipulate. It doesn't inflate or collapse. It just is. Right power in right alignment, inner power, true power, is like the earth, like a mountain. True power is as if you are a rooted tree that does not apologize for taking up space, for being where you are planted, and for putting down roots. So this inner power, how do we build it? How do we start to build on that kind of power, cultivate that inner power if we've been echo for a long time in our lives? So here are a few ways to cultivate and to think about creating some deep inner power, that soul power. Number one is voice work. Start speaking, even if your voice shakes. Say what you want to say what you need, say what you won't tolerate anymore. You don't need to yell. You just need to stop disappearing. So there is a book that I recommend to so many couples, to basically like every couple in my life, but sort of every human who's in relationships. It is called Monsters in Love by Resmaa Menakem. And he is a Minnesota-based therapist who works mainly with couples, but I think, like I said, I think the book applies to relationships in general, but it's really about conflict and how you hold conflict in a relationship. And the reason that it makes me think of this book when I talk about power and speaking up for what you need or what you want and not tolerating but not yelling is that in that book, Resma teaches how when you get to a place where you kind of come to inner alignment, you come to a place of power in yourself, that you straighten your spine, that you speak from a place that is not yelling or whining or saying you're mean or you hurt me. You say, that doesn't work for me. I will not allow you to speak to me that way anymore. I'm done with that behavior. And you get up out of the room, walk away, or you say what you need to say. You allow the person to respond, but it comes from this like really grown up place. Whereas sometimes when we think of power, we think of force, we think of having to yell, or we think of having to manipulate. But true power doesn't hold either manipulation or energy. Power holds force energy. And force is just simply allowing things to move, allowing things to change. So there's that. Thing 2, boundaries as self-respect. So a boundary, a true boundary, is not about controlling someone else. It's about protecting your inner sanctum, your world. Boundaries are a small act of power. They often start with small, brave no's. So when you think about setting a boundary or telling someone no, if that is something that comes up that's really hard for you, if you're someone who fills up your schedule or your calendar to the point of exhaustion, what is something easy and little that you could say no to? What is something that you could choose not to take on for maintaining your own inner power, your own energy level? Give that a try. A third thing to consider when working on your relationship with power is treating your body as a compass. The body never lies. So when you find yourself shrinking, contorting, bracing, going in, that is your signal. Practice tuning in. What does a yes feel like in your body? What does a no feel like in your body? Power lives in recognizing and working with those sensations. Okay, practice number 4 to consider. Using anger as a portal. So anger, as I talked about with the first one in boundaries, when held wisely, is actually a bridge to power. Not rage that lashes out, but anger that says, this is not okay, and I matter too. Echo was never allowed to be angry. It's why she faded away. She was never allowed to have presence, to have power. So reclaiming your power often means learning to let your inner fire rise without shame, letting your inner fire come up without burning yourself or burning others. Number 5, in working with your inner power, use rituals and symbols. Sometimes building power isn't just about going to therapy or getting new tools. It's actually about reclaiming a relationship with the sacred. So maybe in this instance, you light a candle and speak your truth into the flame. Maybe you write a letter to your younger self who had to disappear in order to be loved. Maybe you wear a symbol, a particular piece of jewelry or color or talisman, something that reminds you, I am allowed to exist fully. The talisman or the symbol piece really aligns with me because 2 years ago, my word for the year, I pick a word every single year that kind of is something I want to focus on, an energy that is where I'm aligned with at that time or where I want to be aligned with. And so 2 years ago, power was my word. And what I did, which is actually what I've started to do every year, is I just created a simple bracelet. I'm not wearing it now, but I created this simple little bracelet and I used letter beads and spelled out the word power. And then I decorated it with beads using stones that I knew would integrate or pull in some type of power. And the kind of power that I wanted to cultivate was a more self-led, grounded power. Wasn't the angry power, wasn't the destructive power. It was power that came from, I know my worth, I know my value, I know my voice matters. And I wore that bracelet every day for that year that it was my word. I also customized a journal and had something about power on the cover and on the front. And those symbols were something that I connected with every day to remind myself and to realign with, this is my vision for myself. This is what I'm trying to call in. So I think it's a really special practice to call in ritual and symbolism into your journey anytime you're trying to incorporate some new lesson or some new level of learning for yourself. Power is not something that you conquer. Power is something that you remember. And every time you tell the truth, you choose yourself, you speak up, you say no, every time you take up space, you're laying down new roots. You're giving yourself more room so you have more stability in your power. If you identify with Echo's story, that does not have to be your story forever. You can reclaim your voice. You can become your own reflection and not become obsessed with it, so you don't tip over into the narcissism side or Narcissus. You can come home to your power in your body. So in closing, here are a few invitations I have for you as you move through your week. In your journal, maybe you ask yourself, where have I traded truth for connection? Where have I traded my power for connection? Maybe do some mirror work. Speak aloud something you've been afraid to say to anyone, something you've been afraid to say to yourself, and do that in the mirror and allow yourself to receive it. Practice. Maybe consider a somatic check-in in your body. When I feel power, where do I feel it? Where do I lose it? And if this mantra serves you, consider saying, I do not have to shrink to be loved. I do not have to vanish to be safe. These patterns of power, whether it's abused or neglected, run deep, but so does your actual power, and you are allowed to reclaim it gently, fiercely, fully. I see you, I honor your voice, and I hope this episode helped you feel a little bit less alone and helped you engage a little bit differently with your own internal power. You happy rebel, you. Bye. Thank you for being part of the Happy Rebel podcast community. Stay connected with us on Instagram at Happy Rebel. If you've enjoyed our episodes, please consider rating, liking, and reviewing the podcast. It truly does help us grow. Until next time, this is Kelly Street. Remember, embrace the dark and the light.